Good evening, this is Harvey Ambrose. I am bringing this message today on behalf of the Missionary Baptist Voice of Africa radio program, which is broadcast out of our radio station located in Monrovia, Liberia. And we continue in our study of the book of Matthew. We are in chapter 6, which is the middle chapter of the Sermon on the Mount, the sermon that Christ gave up on a mountain before, I believe, many people. And almost everything in these three chapters, 5, 6, and 7, are in red letters, meaning these are the very words that Jesus spoke in the sermon. I believe it's exact. It's exactly what he said. I don't think there was a lot more to it. It's long enough. It'd make a good sermon just to read it. So I believe that these were the words of the Lord that he saw fit to speak while he walked the earth. And not only to speak, but to have written in the Bible. So we should pay extra care, in my opinion, to pay a lot of attention to what Jesus has to say about things like hypocrisy, things like almsgiving and praying, and fasting. Who would know better about those things than God himself? And Jesus is God in the flesh. God incarnate, we call him. The God-man. He's preaching this sermon, and we start here in chapter 6, now at verse 5, having to do with how we pray, the manner of our prayers. And when thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. But when you pray, use not vain repetitions, as the heathen do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. Be not ye therefore like unto them, for your Father knoweth what things you have need of before ye ask him. And I'll stop the reading right there, and we'll see about if we want to go on to what we call the Lord's Prayer. So verses 5 through 8, we'll discuss that for a little bit. So again, this is a commandment of God that we pray, okay, just like giving alms had been, and it still is. Just doesn't mention a tithe nowadays, but, giving with a cheerful heart as needed. So it's about a commandment and how we observe a commandment, and we are commanded to pray. And he says, but when you pray, don't be a hypocrite about it. A hypocrite is someone who does something to be seen of men rather than from a pure motivation of their heart in response to God. So, a hypocrite, he says, loved to stand. Back in those days, and I still see people that in public pray, not all that different from what is described here. It doesn't say that, I guess I probably, standing in the synagogue, I've seen them standing in church, and on the street corners, I've seen that too. I've seen it in big cathedrals. I've seen it in all kinds of places. It says they love to pray standing in synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. So right there you have it. That's the hypocrite. They pray because they want men to see them pray. They want men to hear them pray. They want to receive glory from men for how well and often they pray. Now I have a problem with this. I'm like anyone else. I go to church. If it's a church that I'm not pastoring, I'm subject to be called upon to pray at church. when I go there. That's kind of terrifying. For some time now, I have been attending a church where I'm not the pastor. So I'm always, we call it under the gun. There's always a possibility that the pastor or someone else will say, would you lead us in prayer? Well, of course, I do what I can. But I like to keep my prayers private. And one of the reasons is this right here. I don't want to be hypocritical. I don't want to say something so that people will hear what I say and think well of me for having said it. I like my prayers to be between me and God whenever possible. Now, I have heard people that pray really good prayers in public, and I believe that they were from the heart, and God had no problem with them, and I rejoiced in it as well. But I'm always afraid that, and perhaps I have prayed that way on a few occasions when asked to, if the Lord was in the prayer. But I would just rather not even have to do it in public and keep my prayer life private between me and God. I'm not against public prayer, but I just recognize the pitfalls that could be there. Because if your words are not from the heart to God, but instead they're what you think people want to hear from you, we're bordering on hypocrisy. That's what it says. Hypocrites pray in synagogues and on the street corners so that they may be seen of men. And he says, okay, if that's their motivation, they are seen of men, so they have their reward. They got exactly what they were seeking for, people seeing them praying. Now that sounds pretty, in a sense that sounds pretty vacuous, pretty meaningless. And that's because it is. What difference does it make what some person thinks about how you pray? Oh, I heard him pray. Man, he was really good at that prayer. Well, what difference does it make what they think? Now, in the few times when I've heard people pray in the Spirit, and it moved my heart to the point of praising God and weeping as they prayed, because it was such a Spirit-filled prayer. And it was clear that it was not something they were doing to be heard of men, but as a response to God working powerfully in their heart, usually they do it with weeping as they pray. I mean, it's clear that God's involved in the prayer. Now that's when prayer is good. Public prayer is good. But so often it's not. It becomes formal. We address things, we address God at the beginning a certain way, that they'll have, kind of predictable ways in which they begin prayer. And they will pray about those things which are predictable. And there's nothing wrong with praying for the sick. There's nothing wrong with praying for the church. There's nothing wrong with, praying for forgiveness. But if it's predictable, it's probably not coming from the Spirit. It's coming from the person, which is probably not much of a prayer at all. I hope I'm not dissuading people from praying. We have to pray. You'll never get saved if you don't pray. And if you are saved, you'll never stay close to God in your affections unless you pray. I'm bad at praying. I just have to confess that. I'm bad at praying both publicly and privately. Sometimes the Lord gets involved and helps me out, and it becomes a great blessing. But so often it is not. It is a great weakness of mine. So I'm the last person to be trying to tell you about this chapter, and at least this section of it, concerning prayer. So we just let Jesus do the talking here. He says, don't do it to be seen of men. That's the first thing. If you do it to be seen of men, if you say it in such a way that you're wanting to gain the admiration of men for how you pray, God counts that as hypocritical. And you will not get a reward from God for that type of prayer, unless it might be a bad reward, a punishment. So he says, instead of that, go into your closet. But thou, verse 6, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door. So you're in a private place, and you have closed even that private place off. It's so different from doing it on the street corners or in the middle of the synagogue. Do it in your home, in a closet of your home, with the door shut, so that you can't be heard. That's what he's saying. That's how prayer should be. So often, now sometimes when Christ prayed, we heard it's written what he said. But he did pray a lot. In the New Testament, we find Christ praying frequently, praying earnestly. But so often, it says he went aside and prayed, or he went up on the mountain and he prayed all night long. It goes on and on about how he, in a sense, he would separate himself a little bit when he went to pray. Sometimes the disciples would see him in prayer. But I don't know if they heard him, but they could see that God was working in him as he prayed. And they said on one occasion, Lord, teach us to pray. They could see the value in proper prayer, and there is great value in it. But it's got to be done right. It shouldn't be only for you and God. That's what it's for. I'm not saying that you're not to be praying for other people, but I'm saying that the prayer should be between you and God to the extent that it can be. Just like we say, Christ was overheard sometimes praying, but it could be, I'm sure whoever heard that it was just like Christ and his Father alone talking. It was all from the heart, for the right reasons, not to be seen of men, even though sometimes men saw it. So he says, enter into thy closet, and when you have shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret. Now, of course we can't see him. So that's secret enough. And of course, he's in another place, so that's also secret. But he's just saying, do it secretly. Do it secretly. You're praying secretly. And thy Father, which seeth in secret, with no one else seeing it, but God, shall reward thee openly. So this is like in the giving of alms. You can either get the reward which you seek if you're wanting men to take acknowledgement of you. See, they hear your long prayers and wearing your long robes and saying the things that makes you sound really intelligent and that you know your scriptures really well and, oh, what a pious man he is. You can get that if that's what you're seeking. For all the good it will do you, which is none. In fact, it worsens your condition because God would count it as hypocritical. If it is, he'll know it. And he'll hold you to account. All our actions, everything we do in the flesh, every idle word we read will be taken into judgment on that great day in which he judges the quick and the dead. So, when we pray, closet, door shut, to God alone, and God which sees in secret will reward thee openly. Now, one of the things I liked about when I lived in Alaska was that there were some very open places I could go. There were some big long beaches with practically no one on them. There were big there were large long back roads where no one was walking. Even rarely would anyone drive by. And then when I could pray, I would pray out loud to God because it helped me to pray out loud. I don't know why. I seldom ever do that when there's other people around. I don't want them to hear me. But out in those open places, I could pray out loud. And somehow as I prayed out loud, the Spirit of God would start strongly working in my heart. And He Himself, the Spirit of God Himself enabled my prayer, bettered it, made it better than I ever could have done it on my own initiative. He would bring things through my heart, into my mind, and out my mouth in prayer that suddenly turned prayer from just something that you're supposed to do to true worship of God. It was a wonderful thing. I say I don't like to pray. When it's like that, I love to pray. But I'm always alone when that happens. I'm in a place where I can speak out loud. I mean, sometimes He's blessed me in silent prayer. But almost always, when I get off by myself, away from people where they cannot hear, and I pray audibly to God, it'll be a little weak prayer like all my other ones are. And then He comes and He blesses me. It's like the heavens open up and He transforms my heart and my mind. He makes the prayer itself a holy thing. I'm not boasting. It only happens if God is doing it within me. But see the difference between hypocrisy, to be seen of men, and truth that only God can see. The true heart of a man or woman as they pray. Jesus is saying, choose the latter, the true prayer with God only, and shun the former. Don't do it to be seen of men. Then He says, but when you pray, verse 7, do not use vain, meaning futile, repetitions, as the heathen do. So the heathen, pagans, we would call them back then, they worshipped idols and all that. They had what in America we say they used mumbo jumbo, a bunch of talking. I've heard people do it in this country. They said they were talking in tongues. I don't believe it. I think it was just a bunch of nonsense. Who knows? God knows the heart. He sees in secret. I don't. All I could hear was what was going on. I've heard people pray in audible words, recognizable words, but they would pray over and over and over again as if they were chanting it, like a chant, saying, whatever, some phrase, and they would say it over and over and over and over again. That's a vain repetition. God, you don't have to tell God 50 times something. He hears it the first time. He knows it before you even speak it. He knows what's on your heart before you even say it. And it talks about that. So don't, now God, when He speaks to us through the Bible here and also in our hearts, He uses repetition because we're weak-minded. We're slow to learn. We're apt to forget the lessons that we've learned from Him. So He, just like our, school teachers when we were in school, repetition. By repetition, the weak mind can be made strong and be caused to remember and improve. But you can't improve God. He's perfect. Everything He knows absolutely. And He's always known, and He always shall know it. Nothing will ever change about it. He knows what's on your heart before you ever pray. And yet He commands you to pray. He knows what you need before you ask for it. And yet He wants you to ask for it. He wants you to be thinking about others when you pray and not just yourself. Christ, when we hear what His prayers were, they were usually almost altogether for other people and not Himself, even though sometimes they were for Himself. And that's how it should be with us too. Mainly for others. Sometimes if you're praying and you're not getting anywhere with God, and if you're a saved person, you know what it's like to pray, and the Lord gets into your heart and opens your heart and all that. And when that doesn't happen, when it just seems as though you're praying and it's not getting outside of your body, it's not reaching God. Well, try shifting to praying about yourself and what you need from Him at the moment. Shifting to praying for others. Start thinking about people that are lost, people that are in some other type of problem, physical or whatever in this world, and they should have your interest in their prayers, in your prayers. And so start praying for them. I have found that often when I pray for others, the Lord will come on the scene and start blessing me and enable me then, when I do get around to talking about myself and making my request, I'm in a conversation with God rather than just talking to the closet of the wall or just inside my own head as I lay down at night trying to pray. Praying for others like Christ did is a good way to do it. It doesn't say that here, but it is true. So don't use vain repetitions. There are those that do it all the time. They have formal prayers, okay, that are written down and memorized, and they say them over and over and over and over and over. It'll be on the radio. They'll be saying this prayer, a very short little prayer, but they'll say it 100 times on the radio. You know, I've heard it driving through cities. What could that be except the very definition of vain repetitions in prayer? So he says, don't do that. Hang on. Sorry about that. I've got a distraction here. Do not use vain repetitions. See if I can find that now. It says, for the heathen think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. And I kind of address that. So like if you keep telling God the same thing, he'll finally hear you. Now, he heard you the first time. Okay. Now, it's not wrong to pray repeatedly, like day after day or week after week or whatever, for something to which God has not given you a response, something that he has not helped you with and you still feel the need of. You might want to adjust how you pray about it, but you know, if it's on your heart, you should bring it up to God. But to sit there and repeat it over and over again in the same prayer is treating God like he doesn't have ears, like he can't hear, like he's slow to hear. Well, he's not. Verse 10. I'm sorry. Verse 8. Be not ye therefore like unto them, meaning don't be like the heathen who do vain repetitions because they think God will hear because they've said it so many times. Don't be like that, for your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before you ask him. Now, that just goes to the omniscience of God. God knows all things. And you know, and I can't deny that I've often wondered about that verse. Since he knows, I mean, it says, Christ said it, so God himself in the flesh said that God knows what you need before you ask. Well then, why does he want us to ask? It's a fair question. If he knows, well, I think that he wants us, this is just my opinion, he wants us to ask because we should not just I think what we have is a tendency to take God for granted. That's what I think. You know, he does cause his sun to rise daily upon the just and the unjust. He brings the rain upon the just and the unjust without respect as to whether or not the people that he's benefiting there praise him or not. He has given me so much in my life that I didn't thank him for at the time. And I look back on it, I think, and I can kind of see, as he did that, I can look back at it now and say, oh, he was working that out for my good. It may have been a bad thing at the time, but he turned it to good. And the Bible tells us about that. It says that he, it says, let me see, I'm having trouble thinking of the verse. Maybe it'll come to me. But in any case, how he causes all things, he says, for we know that all things work together for good to them that love the Lord and are the called according to his purpose. What that means is God takes all the events that we experience in life in this earth, and whether they be good or bad or neutral, yet he takes those and somehow, that only God can do, he uses them to make adjustments to our heart such that we somehow benefit from it. Now, I can't explain that, because that's a working of God. But I can tell you, after so many years of God doing that for me, I look back and I say, well, it's never my intention that it turned out that way, but it wound out way better than I ever thought it could have. And I can't help but believe that even sad things, terrible things, like the loss of our daughter when she was 19 years old and she passed away suddenly. And it's like, how could any good thing come of that? But now God has shown me good things that have come out of that. Good for her when she left because she was saved. Eventually good for us. And in ways that I can't even put into words, but I'm happy with it. That God took her. I think it was a blessing for her and a blessing for us. It's so strange, but it's true. All things work together for good, towards a good end, for those who love God and are the called, according to, in other words, He has called them to sainthood. He has saved them. They love Him, and God has saved them. He works all things for our good. So He knows what we have need of, but He wants us to pray nonetheless. So by regular prayer, He brings to our mind a recollection that He is blessing us all the time, and we need to be thankful. God condemns people for not being thankful. I think, let's turn to the book of Romans really quickly and I'll end this. The book of Romans, I think it's chapter 1. It says, neither were they thankful. Let's see if I can find that. Verse 19. No, let's start at verse 18. Romans 1, verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who hold the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. For the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. We are things that are made, and we understand it because God makes it clear to us. It says what He makes clear, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Because that, when they knew God, they glorified Him not as God, neither were they thankful. I mentioned how God causes the sun to rise upon us. He did it this morning. If the world lasts, He'll do it tomorrow morning. How He causes the rain. How He blesses the growth of the vegetation, how He provides food to everyone in this world every single day. He does this. And most people don't even thank Him for it. Someone that does so much good for us, just physically, just for sinners, for people that will never be saved because they refuse to seek. Yet He's fed them their whole life. He's sheltered them. He's given them family. He's given them pleasure. And they don't even say thank you. And yet down in their heart, they know there's a God and that these things come from Him. Ingratitude. Sometimes we see it in our children. We think, why aren't they grateful for what we've done? Why do they treat us like this? Families have arguments. It hurts when you've done something for someone, and rather than be thankful, they just take it for granted. Well, God's a person, and He certainly is the same way. So, anyway, that's what I have on that. Sorry it was disjointed. There was a phone ringing, and it took my attention off of things. God bless you. Good night.